Welcome, any and all, to episode 7 of Views in Paradise. Today we'll be talking about clockers. I'm your host, John Olson. Joining me, as always, is Rochelle Racine.
Hola.
La I do think we still have a slight lag issue with the Zoom, as always. Um, all right, we'll bitch about Zoom later. First, let me introduce our guest this week, Geoffrey Jean-Baptiste. Hello and welcome.
Welcome, welcome.
All right. Could you give us that again, you guys? Yeah, there's something crazy going on with the Zoom.
Hey there, thanks.
Welcome.
All
Zoom,
right.
we hate you.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I know. It's really been giving us audio troubles that we've been attempting to deal with, but they don't make it easy.
No.
Yeah, they don't make it easy. Anyway, we want to start by talking a little bit about what the film's about. So this is Clockers from 1995 by Spike Lee. Rochelle, do you want to take us through some of the rest of it, like synopsis and cast
Hell
and
yeah.
such?
All right. So, not plot synopsis. Young drug pushers in the projects of Brooklyn live hard, dangerous lives, trapped between their drug bosses and the detectives out to stop them. Directed by Spike Lee. Writing credits Richard Price, who originally wrote the book on this. Screenplay adapted by Richard Price and
Nice.
Spike. As far as cast, top build is Harvey. How do you spell this? Or
Harvey
Keitel?
Weinstein? Harvey Keitel.
Oh my God! Don't say
Keitel.
that word.
What?
John Turturro, Delroy Lindo, Mekhi Phifer. Don't ask us why he's so low on the credits. Isaiah Washington, Keith David, and Regina Taylor, and Pee Wee Love.
Yeah, I feel like Mekhi Phifer got really screwed out of this credit.
Like he's literally the main character.
But it's early in his career still. I don't think.
I understand giving Harvey Keitel higher billing because he's been around forever, but
Right.
and he's prominently featured in the film. But like every scene that's not Harvey Keitel's is Mekhi Phifer's, so like at least give him a second. Like give him.
Well, the whole story revolves around
I know.
Mekhi Phifer.
Yeah.
Like, hello.
I mean that's the other little known thing I think about that film is that Martin Scorsese has a producer credit on that, so him and Spike collab to bring in Harvey Keitel. It seems like and kind of get a little more probably clout in the city. They shot a lot around the city. I feel like
Yeah.
that's they needed the clout to do that.
Yeah, and Harvey Keitel has a history of like getting on board with smaller projects. Like he seems like he likes to work. I guess he doesn't mind playing an asshole, and a lot of films need one.
True.
Um,
It is true.
so, all right, Jeffrey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of, and your relationship with film, just so that we can get a sense of kind of what you like and where kind of your take on this film might be framed from. Yeah,
Sure.
who are
Um,
you?
I guess I'm an avid filmmaker. Um, it's sort of been a long journey of just seeking out films and trying to make them. I saw City of God when I was like 17 at the Angelica, and it just kind of just changed my life and whole perspective. Like I'd seen
That
movies
movie's crazy.
yeah, I'd seen movies and stuff. I'd been in like commercials here and there. I was acting as a kid, and then but saw that and was like, oh snap! Like I I didn't know stories could be that powerful and that mind blowing on so many different levels. So I was like, how do I do that? Like I need to do that for at least one person before I die. So I set out on this journey to kind of do it. And I dropped out of college and I became a personal assistant for this dude that was like living in out of the Chelsea hotel. And he kind of gave me like a primer on like DVX and like what would later become like the Mark Five, uh, the 5D rather.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was logging footage for that dude, and then I just started trying to become a PA, and worked my way up to become.
I'm pretty sure I met you on a set when you were PA.
Yeah, it was a while
It
ago.
was a long time ago. Um,
Lifetime.
yeah, a lifetime ago. Yeah, I want to say it was like probably, I don't know, like six-ish years ago. I want to say. I was doing sound on the set that we met on. Um, yeah, yeah, and I think you were PAing on that set.
Yeah, exactly. So I went from PAing and got into camera department, started ACing, and I've just been like writing all this time, for the last decade. I basically, when I had dropped out, started teaching myself to write, and so just analyzing scripts, writing scripts, reading a ton of scripts. Like I just breathe movies. So like now I've become a Steadicam operator and a DP, and I'm starting to direct a little bit.
Nice.
I'm just like, yeah, loving making dope pictures and telling stories. I mean, telling stories is like the ultimate superpower, and I think that's what I realized when I saw, City of God.
Yeah.
You
So how does Spike Lee wield his superpower in this movie?
I'd say, he's this script is like very well crafted. Like he, sort of deftly proposes that, the black man is at every cycle of his life trapped between, the parent that was himself abused, the cops that are relentless to stop them, and then the peers that are pushing for them to be more aggressive and sort of push this capitalist mental that America sort of glorifies, right? So at every end, there's just sort of not a good decision to make, and even in trying to make the decision, he's he can't make it out because within the first 10 minutes he says, I can't wait to change this shit, and that's how we know he wants to change.
Yeah. I think there's a really great sequence in the film that like really encapsulates that idea that you were just talking about, where so its first strike is with Harvey Keitel, and he's being like grilled by him once again, not for the first time, and then he gets out of that to be picked up by Rodney, right? And then they run into Errol talking to Tyrone and like threatening to burn him with a cigarette, and they get out and like, so like in that, like just like two scenes, essentially three, if you want to get technical, like they're in a car, out of the car, you get like that whole line where like, we obviously know Tyrone is like next, he's like the strike to be, and we've already kind of had that context that Errol like essentially broke Rodney a long time ago. So like, yeah, you get, I think, and then just, it's like he can't go from one to the other, like with it's just always there, right?
Yeah, and I think the expectation is that he's he's showing us this through a sort of step back lens, and even the voyeuristic stuff. So like we kind of expect Rodney, even in the beginning, he's like, he starts out and he's all hard and he's pushing the soldiers to get back to work, but very quickly Spike Lee starts dropping hints that he's not trying to be a bad person. He really is a soft guy. Even like one of the second times he gets interrogated, he's like, I like trains, bro. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to be like, nah, this guy that likes trains, but because he's black, we have to assume that he would do the deed and he would
Right.
be complicit in all of this, right?
Well, and they even bring up basketball, right? They're like, you must be good at basketball, right?
Right.
Like just straight to his face, and he's like, exactly like you just said, I like trains. Like, am I not allowed to have a separate hobby? Yeah, it's very explicit about how it tells you that.
Yeah. Can I jump in real quick since we're talking about Spike Lee's superpower?
Sure.
I think one of his is his summarization technique. I cannot speak today. He compresses like serious debates and concerns in this specific instance in the Black community, which is obviously a pattern throughout his work. And he does this by putting them into like expressive moments with action or dialogue. And the one that stood out to me in Clockers was the scene where the kids are sitting in front of Rodney's shop. One of the kids is rapping, and another one is beatboxing. And the other children are audience members of this. And the two sides to this are we feel the artistry, skill, and like the continuation of oral tradition of oral art, the tradition of oral art. Wow, get it together, Rochelle. But we're also simultaneously struck by the violent nature of the lyrics that we're hearing. And these are very subtle moments that he sprinkles throughout his filmmaking, and you blink, you miss it, you know, and you really have to like watch it and understand the message. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's just a comment on that. I think it's subtle, but like if you blink and you miss it, you'll see it again. Like, yeah, exactly. I like Spike Lee's like constantly doing this to you, especially in this film.
Yeah,
like
especially.
Just constantly. It's like you're at the bar and then there's like that shot of the TV and then like the sexualization of women. You know, like it's just and like maybe you miss that one, but there's like you know, another one like right around the corner. Where...
I mean, even the shot that she's referring to is like it's twofold shot, right? And there's a lot of these like motifs of like these circular pans, these things going around each other, and that shot starts on those kids and pans over, and then we pan over to the white privilege Mercedes-Benz that's just there to pick up drugs, and the juxtaposition is that simple, right? Yeah. It's panned over the camera, and we're seeing across the street, right? But he's very, you know, it's so simple but effective. And even at a distance, you know, we were up close with them, and then we're at a distance with the privilege, and at that distance, it's obvious, right? Yeah. So it's very well done.
Yeah, and this movie, in that way, like it never lets anyone that you meet off the hook, right? Like, there's literally no complete good guy characters in this film. Right, maybe Tyrone's mom, like, but even she actually no. Everyone gets their hands dirty. Like literally everyone is forced to get their hands dirty, regardless of if they're good people or not. Like we constantly see them like having, you know, the whole system, like get everybody dirty. So like even the mom with her son in the confession, right? Like her acting, by the way, in that scene. Like it kills you.
I would like to touch on her being the only good character. This is a very simple, subtle thing, but like, had she got her child's hair cut, her and Tyrone and Strike would never have had that interaction that they ended up having. And it's like little simple things like that. However, we also have to see that like she may not have had the money to do that on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
and maybe she just wants to separate him from what they're doing also.
Okay.
And I think you know it also shows his deafness again, because creating such dimensionality in a you know sort of a character we only see in a couple of scenes. Yeah. She's important. Like, you know, she has that quality of like, obviously, like you said, she should have been maybe able to get him those haircuts and maybe something to do, whatever, but she couldn't afford it. But at the same time, you know, we see her sort of wielding godlike power in the middle of this dangerous project, smacking dudes up in the face, pointing her finger in she like disarms them and they're powerless to her behavior because she is so morally superior and you know even his attempts to try and you know to hit back at her, he can barely muster nothing that she's not saying to him.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, he knows that like to fight her in that situation, isn't gonna improve his life in any way, shape, or form. You know, like, and it's like she's as threatening as any of the like police figures, like in that sense. Like she does kind of wield a power there. Like she's in there and she's like, I am taking the high road and you know it, and like stop trying to like do stuff with my kid. Like she has every right to kind of be in his face about it.
Right.
But then like when Tyrone is, and like full spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, and maybe it's even hard to follow if you don't know the characters' names. But like Tyrone is a young kid who gets arrested for shooting, and everybody does everything to try and get him off as easy as possible. How do we feel about this? Because this is one of the really interesting things that he does near the lake, in the late game of this film.
Okay. This is obviously a very convoluted answer, and I think we need to kind of start at when we first meet Rocco. So let me think.
And so Rocco is Harvey Keitel's detective who's been investigating this murder.
Right. So this speaks to his character arc. So the lifestyle in this neighborhood is widely observed by a predominantly white police force, and they make hollow attempts to keep order, and like they refuse to intervene with the community's gradual decline, correct? And obviously we're still seeing that. And I mean, at the end of the day, just to kind of touch on this real quick, cops are civil servants. Like their literal like mission statement is to protect and serve. And clearly we're not seeing that and have not seen that. And we
and this movie is all about that.
Right. This movie is all about that. And we see like the casual racism and how that's like an epidemic and like deeply a part of American culture throughout this film. Like Spike Lee talks about that a lot and like everything that he makes.
Yeah.
And Rocco, the lead detective, is very much a character of casual racism. You know, he's a white detective who cannot understand the culture. There is a kind of like, and you see this throughout the film, but then it really becomes apparent towards the end when he is in this interrogation room with the child. It's partial refusal to understand, and it's partial just being jaded and just not able to empathize with the situation. And that is clearly coming from the job and his socioeconomic status and the white privilege that obviously he's getting. And originally he's introduced in the scene on like a homicide where he and the other officers are clearly detached from corpse, and they're cracking bad jokes, and they're like asking bloodied corpse questions, and like, is this
but like even before that we see them, they do like a shot, they're like, fuck it, we can't do this sober.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeffrey, what are you gonna say?
I think that's the, you know, the major like contrast, and like, you know, again exemplifies this superpower that, you know, Spike Lee is using so well. You know, he sets up very quickly that, you know, with his opening credits, he's like, you know, these are all the black bodies, you know, who knows whether it's police brutality or black on black crime. It's kind of just like, we don't really know. And then we're open on this scene, and it's like, okay, well, this is how these cops talk about, you know, the victims, and this is how they talk about the general surrounding public that's now viewing this victim. And then, you know, we sort of
and they do it to an audience also. Like there's a lot of people, and there's bystanders very close by, and they're very callous and like cracking jokes, and like you could like, you can't even write it off as like gallows humor, because it's just dehumanizing. Yeah, I
completely agree. It is callous humor. Maybe not to us, you know, because like literally at the end of the day, it's not fucking funny. But to them, it's funny, and
well, it's a way for them
like a
to. Sorry.
They use it as a psychological like coping mechanism because they're seeing this like depravity every day instead of being a fucking cop. And it's the character. One of the character arcs of Rocco is this is his coping mechanism in the end, and by the end it becomes someone who is just trying to save this kid and eventually strike. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just right on there with you, where like laughter is something that allows people to cope with difficult circumstances, and like studies have been done to show that we we can handle in the moment more horrific things if there's an element of humor or laughter, and so like they're clearly doing this like on an instinctual level, right?
Yeah.
But like the effect that it has on the environment around them isn't taken into consideration, right?
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, are
yeah.
they capable of even seeing that at this point? No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're just so drenched in privilege that they're that's the sort of like thin layer that's in every slice of the cops. It's like, even when they're taking that shot, it's like they're supposed to be taking this absolutely morally superior route, but they're dehumanizing, in every chance they get. They're drinking on the job. You know what I mean? Like, what form of excellence are they pursuing? You know what I mean? And it's and even pursuing such a low level of or such a mediocrity, they're still able to live very comfortable, protected lives, right?
Yeah. Like Harvey Keitel doesn't walk around with any sense that anyone's gonna hurt him ever in this film, right? Like,
right. I mean, I think him, the fact that he sets him up just to find out the truth. He would sacrifice his life, whether he knew whether or not he did it or not, is a very, very, like he just gave it up. He was like, yeah, I don't actually care what the result is. I want to get my answer. That's all I care about.
Yeah. And I feel like at a certain point, it's like around the middle of the movie, it seems fairly clear that like they know Rodney to be the like source of a lot of their immediate problems. But he's very like, and so it's like, okay, anything that can tie this to Rodney is a win, is a good answer for me. And so it blinds him to the fact that it could be something else, right? He's like, I know I want to nail that guy with accessory to murder, and like it doesn't matter to him really if the facts line up. Like he's just in a position where he's like, I see that as the problem, and like I'm going to do so. Like that reveal I think is very telling of his character. And then when the thing happens with the kid, I just couldn't help feeling like he's being sympathetic without being empathetic.
It's white guilt, bro.
Like, yeah, it's true. Like we finally get an interaction between our patrolman from the projects and Harvey Keitel, and they clearly know each other. Like, this is a man who lives in the area where he's working. Like, and he's like, he gives him that, like he pleads with him over the kid, and it's like suddenly it's personal, right? This is a thing that's been talked about, at least on my view of the social world a lot recently, is just, that, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. But it was just about like Harvey Keitel's, where was it? I like spun off the rails, guys. Do you have something you want to say, Geoffrey?
Well, yeah. The fact that these guys kind of, have no repercussions, just like it kind of just is resonated throughout. There's no repercussions they're not really trying to find out what happens. Like, these actions are all just to like show, show how they perceive the world, you know what I mean? And like really like it can't be any different. You know what I mean? No matter, it's like it's a world view thing, and that with that point, he kind of plays his brother off of him and then his father, because it's not really like he says son, but like it doesn't really. How could you treat your son that way, right? But like it automatically pins his father against him because in this cycle, how could you also be like I'm going to choose him over drugs, not choose him over drugs, so it's like they kind of push these kids back into the situation, the place that they would be able to get out through the eyes of this cop that is able to understand psychology. Again and again, it's repeated how deftly these detectives understand psychologies and how people are driven to do these things, but to their ends, it helps no one. And to if they took a second even to just be like, what is really happening, they might find a way to help them. Just like the kid, the I forget that character's name. He's like the project police.
Here, yeah, we can find it.
Yeah. But
Keith David? No.
He's a great actor.
Where is he?
Character?
Yeah, Keith David's character.
Yes, exactly.
Andre the Giant, they call him in this film.
So,
exactly. I remember.
Andre.
That shows as a contrast again. He's using so many foils against each other, but like Spike, that is. But he shows how you can start initiatives. You can be involved in the community. You can be talking to a kid who you see dealing with the wrong people and try and help them and prevent them from getting into these situations. Like, there is an example of how you can do good copying. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And they're just refusing to do it and refusing to see. And that is, I guess, is again the white privilege of that ability to just decide not to see it.
I don't agree that he was being the good cop. I do think he was trying, but he was not going deep enough. Like, we see how he hyper focuses on Tyrone and the relationship with Strikes instead of focusing on the higher, like more criminal minds influencing Strike. You got to go to the source.
I feel that it's just he's also he's not a detective. It's like he can only do so much. He's not he's a beat cop. So like I feel like he's just doing.
He is running a community center, which is pretty telling of his character.
Well, of course, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but like as someone who has a deep understanding of this community, he should know to go to the source, whether or not he's
I think what's the film with Spike Lee and what's the other writer's name, and Richard Price and Spike Lee. I think what they're doing with his character is showing that like even when you are a piece in that system, like you're still stuck within this greater system. Like I think that's kind of what his function in the film serves, right? It's to like really highlight that like you can, okay, don't be a criminal, be a cop. And it's like, does that get him out of that system? Not really.
Not really. Well, like even if you're in this position of power at the end of the day, when you are Black and you live in this type of community, how much power do you have?
Well, that's yeah, and I think that that's the point, is that like he has to beg Harley Keitel to help him, right? And like even if he didn't have to beg, like have to with Harvey Keitel's character, he would probably still feel like he needed to do that, right? And like that's the admonishment that I think is being kind of cast here.
For sure.
Okay.
Not perfect. It's just relative. I just think it's just enough of, because like there are a lot of subplots, right? There's the Errol subplot with the kid, the murder subplot with his, which is almost two plots. That's his brother's plot and did he actually do it or not, right?
Yeah.
And, there's the plot between him and Ronnie, right? So it's kind of just a lot of different glimpses, and even though the movie's 2 hours, there's so much going on.
There's really so much
into the right directions of the ideas that Spike's getting at. And I think that's where that deftness comes in. There's just enough said to sort of convey the message.
Yeah. Can we talk about Rodney's character for
Hold,
a minute?
can
Oh,
we
go
just
ahead.
interject real quick because we just kind of discussed the use of alcohol. So Strike, we see throughout the film, his vice is chocolate mousse, which is
Okay, yeah.
basically yoo-hoo. And uh he drinks this, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but he drinks this because he has stomach issues, which is probably an ulcer, right?
It's got to be an
And
ulcer, right? The way he coughs
it's
up
gotta
the
be an
blood
ulcer.
and they send him
Yeah,
back out. Like,
it's got to be like a really bad ulcer. So clearly, like this stomach issue represents the problems plaguing the Black community that we were also just discussing in neighborhoods like this. And Geoffrey, you had something good to say on what the milk actually represents.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it represents among the things, alongside his actual like his super intention, right, is to escape. It's really to get out of this world. So, Spike drops hints, with the trains and, him even trying to, even though he's perpetuating the cycle, him trying to take this kid under his wing, like, and, teach him the stuff because the, generation before him taught him to not at least tell him to do the drugs. Like, there's this thing about him trying to do the right thing. And I think amid, the drugs, alcohol, the things that he could be doing, while he's drinking this, milk drink that probably just makes him feel good because, he says, when he goes to the bar, the barman says, drink this, it's sweet, because everybody just thinks he just likes sweet shit because he just pretty much, I guess, it represents his internal desire to have better than what his current experience is. And then again, in turn, it develops an issue where, the sugar and just a diet of being on the block all the time, not eating and drinking that shit just gives him an ulcer. And it just doesn't help. At first, it might probably helps him feel like it feels better, but it ends up making the ulcer worse and taking longer for him to get treated. So it becomes this thing that represents his desire to do better, wrapped in something that makes it absolutely worse. And that kind of represents what the cops are doing, what he's doing, what Rodney is perceivably doing when he's creating this place for young kids to, when he's telling them about the things that, not being a zero and all that, this capitalist idea, there is this desire to get out, that is a big idea that Spike drives home, is that it's not because we're not trying. You know what I'm saying? And I think, that idea of him being, drinking it and it internalizing and then out and then it becoming externalized is a very powerful subtext to represent, most of that.
yeah. It's like you really can't catch a break, even with something so innocuous as a yoo-hoo.
Yeah.
Like, even that is giving him an ulcer.
I mean,
High fructose corn syrup, y'all.
right.
Vegetables. Eat vegetables.
That's that 90s stuff, right? Like everything, I think those corn syrup.
Yeah. It's true. And you kind of mentioned about Rodney what I had wanted to touch on. And it is the way that he talks to, like, the most telling scene with Rodney for me was the one where Strike walks in and he's talking to the other kids and he's like mouthing the speech to himself. He's heard it. He knows it by heart. Right. Like, and he's probably practicing to give it to somebody else, right? To Tyrone or whoever it be. And it really reminded me of like a number of other films, even like American History X. Have you guys both seen that? He's like a Stacy Keach character, right? In the way that he talks to people, like the same tools of sort of indoctrination and like cult or abuse. Like they're just creating a system in which to perpetuate the use, and it's like they worship at this cult of money. And like I was even thinking about how when he does the math with Tyrone, the money that he gets, his cut, the 3,500, is not that much. Like it might take him, I don't know, like a couple of weeks to sell that, right? So like, let's say he's making 7,000 a month, like that's still money that you can burn pretty easily. Life gets really expensive really quick. Like, it's not really even like a killing. It just looks like a lot because it's cash, you know. But it's just like I thought about sort of like characters like that, and just kind of you see the same tactics kind of used throughout, that they can be used for like any number of nefarious purposes. And in this one, it's just kind of keep his system going.
Also, so I also feel like it's like a divot in the road where, as the viewer, you get to make a choice. Either you think that, he has a choice in the matter, or you think that he's a really bad person, right? Like, there's kind of like, you have to like make that decision now that you realize that this is a cycle that was perpetuated on Rodney. Rodney's perpetuated on Rodney. Like, it's like, it can't ever end. So like, are these victims really, perpetrators? I mean, yes, they are, but I mean, you can't.
Yeah,
you can't.
but where fault lies becomes very fuzzy very quickly.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. And so it's just like it is another example of this movie being very layered and like using its characters to convey like a lot of different things at once.
Right.
I'm just kind of glancing over some stuff we've got here. So
Complicated movie.
yeah, what's that?
It's a complicated film. Thank goodness for our notes.
I know. This film it's really deep. I really appreciated it. And so I wanted to talk about Strike and the whodunit story a little bit. We're gonna spoil I'm gonna spoil the end of the film right now. So Spike, who shares a name with our erstwhile director, the whole movie, like the movie is telling us that he killed this guy. Like, not just Harvey Keitel is telling us, but like the movie is trying to get us to think that he killed the guy and that his brother is covering for him, right? We get that awful speech where the detective says he was one of the good ones, which is just like, it's such a cringing statement. It's so back in its backhandedness.
Can I interject really quick? Just discussing this milk and what it meant. Before he's supposed to kill that guy, he kind of has second thoughts and goes into the bar and asks for it. So he's trying to do the right thing, right? And that's when it's his brother. No?
Yeah.
So it's like a subtle hint that he didn't.
Right. There are clues, but the film is telegraphing you all of the evidence in the other direction, right?
Right. No, of course. I'm just saying that, like, if you're paying attention and you realize what the milk means, he didn't do it. Of course, you don't figure this out as you're watching. But
what's that, Geoffrey?
But he's also he's trying to find a way out. Maybe even in our imagination, maybe he does, because he wouldn't have. Because we still think he still conspired a little bit. He antagonized his brother into doing it, even if his brother did it. So it's very, we just don't know whether that story or not that he told him was true. So he was, it does a lot of things, including showing that he doesn't have the backbone to kill someone.
Yeah.
He's trying to pawn it off on his brother at best. You know what I mean?
But I felt like the brother was the least capable character of killing.
But I think that's why they did it, right?
Yeah,
it's because he is the person who everyone says is the quote unquote the good one. And the pressure of being the good one, I think, is what cracks him. He's got 2 jobs, he's got 2 kids, he's dealing with just the stress of life, and like on top of that, his little brother is, like a gang member selling, selling death, as they say. And
Is
his little brother reveals to him that he's in a pinch, and he's already just like on that lowest of lows. And so I think that like the mother's explanation of what happened gives very credible motive, right? Like there's still a chance that it might not have been him, but
yeah.
but based on what we're given, right?
Quick question: is the brothers' family the only nuclear family that we see throughout this film?
Yes.
I think so. We don't
Directly,
really
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just a thought I just had.
Yeah, we see a lot of people out in the environment, but the only time we see a family in its home is the brother's family.
see a lot of lost boys,
Yeah.
But yeah,
Go ahead. I was just going to ask you what you were going to say.
I feel like it very directly serves as this foil of the other person trying to do the very right thing. He ultimately, whether or not he did the right thing, is still up for grabs in anyone's court, right? Like the dude was beating up a 16-year-old based on his impression. He was also selling drugs out of a fast food shop where families go. You know what I mean? In his view, and probably in ours, ultimately, because it's a movie and because characters aren't people, right?
Yeah.
You will think that he did the right thing, right? And I think even in doing the right thing, he ends up directly in prison, even as he's confessing, and he can't even get bail. So it's just this system that wants to trap Black men by any means necessary. Whether they are moral and law-abiding, they're quick to vilify them because that's again the privilege. Any white dude in some similar situation would have been like, yeah, I was protecting myself. And that would have been a wrap. They would have stopped talking to him. He would have gone home, and then there would be no movie, right?
Yeah. And I think Spike tells the detective very directly, where he says, I tell you, you asked me if I did it. I tell you I didn't. You don't believe me. Like, he says he did it. You still don't believe us. Like, it doesn't matter what we tell you. You're not going to believe us because that's the answer we gave you. Like, he throws it very directly in his face in a very satisfying manner, really.
How much does this pattern speak to the school to prison pipeline?
A lot.
Well, essentially, through the course of this movie, this shows that like there are so many attempts to stop Black men from going to school. Even by Strike trying to get the kid to sell drugs. By his dad, getting him to do it. Like there's so many ways. By the cops, like trying to incriminate these kids. There's so many ways for them to get derailed on their way to school, and there's just not the only thing that they're learning from anyone, including the people investigating them, is that they are destined to go to this place. The teachers are telling them that, the cops are telling them that. Like there is no one in this landscape saying, guys, you can find smarter ways to, because like you said very aptly, I've done a lot in my life, and I can tell you the legwork behind just watching my friends sell drugs is like, come on, like you got to go to 20 different places a day at least, or like have 30, 40 interactions a day just to make, maybe 20K a year. Like it's not the risk reward is clearly not there, and anyone who does it quickly realizes it. And I think it's that's the point Spike makes heavily, is that it's presumptuous to think that they wouldn't do it if they didn't have any other choice.
Right. The goal is to be what's that, Rochelle? Sorry.
Real quick, survival crimes. That's what this is.
Right.
Period.
Yeah. And I think that the incentivizing force is Rodney, right? Because he is the success story of drug dealing. He doesn't do drugs. He's used the money to buy his own shop, right? He's got a
That's
network of people that work under him, right?
That's
So
his crime. You gotta have that.
yeah, but that's what I mean. But like, it's his shop. It says Rodney's on the outside, right? So this is the dream that's being sold to the other kids. Is like, you'll have enough money that if you want, you could put your name on something, and you could have a network of little underlings under you who are all just bringing in you passive income, right?
Right.
Like he's the dream that
He's
they
also-
are all trying to kind of get to, essentially.
Yeah, and he's also reinforcing that he's a really intelligent one, right? He
Yeah,
hasn't
and
got
everybody, I mean the clockers who are specifically, yeah.
right. Because even in having a front, even for back then, it's like you have to have a high level business mentality to be able to achieve something like that, clean the money responsibly, whatever it is. Learn that he's intelligent, and you know that he's been so long with this thing that it's his baby. There's a physical representation of his baby, right? And it's not Ronnie. You know what I mean? It's his store and his business,
Yeah.
and that kind of ultimately gives us his choice of like, you know, not, you know, because if he was successful, you know, I mean, what does that say about this man that would snuff out his own progeniture, his only sons, or his only son in his line of work, even, like, you know what I mean? If you're thinking about that in that kind of way, if anything, you would want your son to survive and continue your legacy of whatever, you know, but he's like, you know, on some Julius Caesar shit, like, bro, like, I'm gonna, you can't, like, you just can't. And it's like, but if you can't trust your family, then who can you trust? You know, at least in The Godfather, that's what was the pillars of their framework, you know, the Cosa Nostra, La Familia, like, it's, you know, family is everything, and we do everything as family. The only thing that mobsters have, is that they have their morality in their family, right? And so without that, you know, you're just, you know, a crazed monster, you know?
Yeah, exactly. What's it?
I was just gonna say before we wrap up, there's something that I want you to say because we had very different views. But go ahead, finish your thought.
Oh no, go ahead.
It was just about the scene, you know, the opening credits.
Oh yeah, I felt it to be a very, like just a very well put together thesis statement for the film, right? Where it's like a parade of Black culture in both the like art and music, and in like this idea that they're surrounded by death, right?
Real quick,
Yeah.
would they still have this oral and visual culture without the ugly side?
It would be different.
Well, yeah, but
there's, I mean, that's rewriting history. They would be. I feel like that question takes us down a dangerous road that says, well, if you completely shuffled up our circumstances, like, would we do something genetically? Like, it becomes a nature nurture argument. Whereas I feel like we all are a product of our circumstance, and that circumstance, those people in that circumstance have created incredible art and culture that we all take part in, right?
I have to say real quick that, like, this is even more controversial to some people. White America doesn't have culture. And I think that's largely because of the comfort that they live.
Well,
you see very little
art.
Hold
on, before I push back on that.
Jeff? There's something that I read in Baldwin, you know, a few months ago that like made me think about that, because I've always thought about this aspect of African culture, just, you know, always having this, you know, rhythm, the drums, you know, all drums really come from Africa, you know, soul of everything, you know, but even natives had, you know, Native Americans had a lot of this sort of soulful jubilation. And I think it just comes from being, you know, a texture, you know, reverberation of what being in touch with the world surrounding you is. And Baldwin described it where I guess it was something that, is described in diaspora as, in French, it's sentir c'est percevoir, but it means like feeling is perceiving. And that generally is just something like in Africa, not just people that are artists make art, right? Everybody does some kind of thing, and they have a thing that they do, whether it's dancing or constructing something. It's for everybody. Art is something that for all of us, right?
It's made to be shared.
Right. Real quick, I just thought of a really good book that I think a lot of people should read, and it could explain how, like, drums from Africa and the culture of drumming spread. I forget the name of the author, but the title is called They Came Before Columbus.
Oh, wow.
I've heard of it.
Everyone read it.
Probably just because I used to work in a bookstore, though.
Okay, pushback.
So,
John.
okay, so this is, it's not pushback so much as I just think maybe a little additional insight along those lines. And it's the idea, what you said about white culture not being a thing, I think is in
America. America.
Yeah, so I think it is a side effect of white privilege, right?
Right.
So all whites have privilege, but that privilege also extends to things like subdivided culture. So, like, if you are German of descent, suddenly you have culture, right? Or if you are Scandinavian descent, right? Like, Vikings drew runes, and like Celtic weaves, and like every culture on the planet. So like when we came here,
you're saying the people that are still there,
right? So like in America, if you're black, you're part of black culture, but if you're white, we break it down, right? And like that itself is a part of white privilege, right?
Well, I think that was a big part of the initial civil rights movement with dudes like Marcus Garvey, that were talking about getting in, even Malcolm X talked about like getting in touch with the culture because, they, deleted our last names. We had no last names. Without knowing your culture, you're forced to create your own and sort of start this something new. You don't have that reference points of being like, oh, I can download my culture and my, or even, my ancestor tree. Like, I don't know my uncle. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have beyond, the last 20 years a view of what my kinship was. It's all sort of lost to the time. And I think that allows you to keep moving on a comfortable level, whereas you always have this sort of identity anxiety, when you're being assaulted with a culture that doesn't glorify you, but glorifies what you create.
Yeah, like a privilege that I have is that like I know of like fourth cousins in Norway, right? Because we know who came over, when they came over, and like somehow, some magical way we managed to keep in touch with like another branch of the family that stayed behind, right? But like anyone who's descendant from the African slave trade can't do that. And like they might not know what country or region that their ancestors came from. They might not. I would dare say a large percentage have no idea.
West Africa.
And
I think pretty.
But like could you say specifically what country your ancestors lived in, right?
You said region, West Africa.
Okay, but it's very broad, right? You have a very broad.
Companies like that are changing that now in the last couple years, but until then, it was basically anyone's guess. Besides, people that were really, 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 really crazy survivors and that really fought to keep that information. Even, for somebody that's African American, it's entirely different than somebody like me, who I'm first generation West Indian American, and that type of I don't even know 100 years before, you know what I mean? Like an African American might then have 100 years of his family lineage that he can draw back, but as a West Indian American, like I could probably do like the last 20 to 40 years, you know what I mean? Right. Just because my parents just came off the boat. They started their first life here when they were 15 and 18. Like, I'm the newest edition. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no before me that was American. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's like, you know, a crazy just sort of identity perspective to
You know, on my mother's side, I have the same situation. My mother came from Iran, and to touch on what John said, like, I have the privilege of knowing my family in Iran and knowing the family from Iran that immigrated to Germany. I mean, you know, first bloodline family. And of course, we lack like the Caucasian look. But yeah, like, is that something that's more prevalent these days where like globalization is so accessible? Immigration is a lot easier. So how much privilege at the end of the day does that give us, even though a lot of the times these people escape poverty, or in my mother's case, war and revolution, right? So like, where does that privilege lie in the circumstances that these people had to leave?
What do you mean? Which these people are you referring to?
Anybody that's recently immigrated here.
I mean, I just think it gives us an easier time of identifying what our culture is or can be, right?
Right.
And
like, I'm very aware of my culture.
Yeah.
Very
So like, if you want, and I think that culture is a divisive thing in general, but I think that it provides us comfort to an extent, right? We can allow ourselves to identify with something that gives us a very human comfort, right? Like, I used to like the idea that, you know, I could come from Vikings, and it's like probably all of my ancestors were farmers and they were not away a Viking, right? But it's a fun concept, right? And like, they've got lots of cool art and lore and poetry, and like, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, you know?
Vikings are fucking cool, let's be real. Like,
that brings to the point of, you know, why Black Panther was such a big movie. Like, you know, it's like having any mythos at all,
because you're building it now. Yeah.
That's a good film. Okay.
Yes.
While we wrap up, and let's everyone try to keep this short, I might not even like comment on this question, but is Clockers on par with Boys in the Hood and or The Wire?
Oh my God, I haven't seen either of those things.
What? Okay, you need to see The Wire. Like,
I know everyone's been telling me The Wire forever, and it's like this with the beepers, right? That's what I heard. They have beepers.
Yeah, they have beepers because it's like in the early '90s, mid '90s. God, what is the guy that does The Wire? I should know this because
I know everybody tells you it's great.
It's freaking awesome.
I mean, there's a bunch of Idris Elba came out on that. You know, a bunch of big actors on The Wire.
Yeah.
So it's a really good show.
Just real quick for the listeners, like, if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's a David Simon production, etc. And if you're not familiar with who he is, he's a former journalist. He grew up in Baltimore, and this series, which was on HBO, is very it's his first project. And then we kind of see him evolve into Treme, which is about post Katrina New Orleans, which isn't as like acclaimed as The Wire, but
it's a doc.
I think it's beautiful.
Or no,
and
it's
now
not. It feels like a doc.
And now he's doing The Deuce, which is about prostitution in New York back in what, the 70s? Yeah, the 70s.
Yeah, I've seen some of the Treme actually.
Oh, really?
It was good.
I love that. I love that one.
I mean, I'd say you know, it's definitely up there with both of those. I have trouble comparing those types of movies just because, you know, Spike Lee's giving an essay, you know, and you know, Don Singleton's giving us like the action movie. You know, he's definitely showing us the psychology behind the violence and that juxtaposition. But I think, you know, Spike Lee is a little more eloquently just kind of getting to the direct of, you know, what do you really think about, what do you really think Strike's going to do this whole movie? Mm-hmm. You know, you really have that setting you up to have an expectation that you maybe didn't know or that you were going to have, or whatever it was, to have you have that internal discussion. Whereas Boys in the Hood is kind of very blatant that this is very, you know, bad, and sort of The Wire is kind of caught between that, voyeuristic. I guess it is sort of a good medley of both of those films, since there is, the violence and the sort of slow burn.
Yeah. A movie that I thought of when I was just like trying to think of things to compare this to, and I feel like this is actually a much more successful version, but was kind of trying to say some of the same stuff, was Crash. Like Crash was it was like this really well intentioned movie, but like it came off really cloying and like, trying to kind of represent too many people like to be effective. And like this movie I feel like is a really successful like version of that messaging. Like it's it is both focused and broad. Like it manages to do a lot within the context of this very simple story, really. That was my comparison note.
All right, time to wrap up. It's 101.
All right, so we're getting better at our hour, landing our hour. Thank you so much, Geoffrey Jean-Baptiste. I love your last name.
Are you oh, that's right. Okay, never mind. I was gonna say the last name, but you literally just said.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Where can the people find you? Is there anything that you want to, I don't know, promote or just kind of mention that's coming up or anything like that?
I'm kind of, it's been quarantine, so just kind of like developing some projects right now, but follow me on Insta at Authorized Dealer. Stay tuned. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of us are gonna have projects dropping after this isolation.
Yeah. And if you have something to promote, you can always reach out to us as a friend of the show. We'll do all we can to cross promote.
Right. And like come back on so you can do that yourself. No?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great having you. Hopefully I'll be able to fix our interface and we'll have better audio in the future. We've been working on it. It's just been...
And an easier time for John to get us going.
Yeah, it takes me a while to set up. We're working on it, so things to come. Rochelle, where can the people find you?
Instagram and Twitter. I've stopped harassing Donald Trump for now. Oh, by the way, his birthday's on the 14th. So
all birthdays matter.
You make sure you post a photo of Obama and wish him a happy birthday.
Yeah. All birthdays matter. All of them.
Not his.
Right? Like that's what we have to say on his birthday, right? It's like it's not happy birthday. It's happy everyone who has a birthday day.
And Obama was a better president than you. And I'll just link everything below because I have 2 different handles.
All right. We put up the one Rochelle Racine. I believe that's your Instagram. You can find me mostly on Instagram at John and Paradox. Maybe one day I'll use the Twitter. If you want to follow me there, you can find it. I think that's all we've got. So with that, everybody, watch more movies.
Have a good night.
And that's a wrap.